Hello there, everybody. Welcome back to Star Wars Lads. We've got for you all a review today for the latest audio drama from Star Wars and the High Republic. This is Tempest Breaker by Cavan Scott. And yes, it's once again about Cavan Scott's favorite character, Lourna Dee. So we're not going to go into spoilers. Of course, this will be a non-spoiler review. So for those of you who are interested in maybe checking this out, we're going to give you our thoughts on the story, the structure, and of course, the production around this audio drama. This is an audio drama, not an audio book. Make sure you like the video if you haven't. Subscribe for more High Republic coverage. We review every single High Republic adult, young adult, and of course audio drama. All right, let's get in to Tempest Breaker. And right off the bat, we are going to start with our review of the story and the production value around the audio drama. Sanak, when you were listening to this audio drama, how did it compare to some of the other ones you've heard, and what did you think overall of the story of Tempest Breaker?
Yeah, I thought the production, as always, was pretty high quality. I mean, again, this is an audio drama, not an audio book, so everyone gets an individual voice. There's some great selection of music cues and just background music in general. And this was no slouch. This is Del Rey, Random Worlds going crazy with the possibilities of like putting in a full, like almost theatrical experience. They even have in some scenes like the audio shifting left to right, so you can almost feel like spatially you're in the same situations that are being described by characters like Lourna Dee. So I thought all of that on a technical level, really, really strong stuff. I think though it's not at the same level as a Battle of Jeddah. Its best comparison really is Tempest Runner, the previous Lourna Dee story. The scope of it is pretty similar. It is very insular to the character, even though this one definitely has more characters involved and you're jumping to all these different locations and there are different storylines. It is still comparable, whereas Battle of Jeddah somehow, in a really great way, managed to weave together all of these different characters and their storylines happening all across the city. And I don't think this story necessarily had to ever reach that level of intricacy, but it was something that I think that could have actually benefited from. Sometimes it felt like it was very stop and start. If it weren't for the really strong voice acting, I think I would have been a little bit more confused about like why are we jumping? Why are we recapping? Why are we like going through such an uneven pacing? Like you said, there are characters that we've kind of met already in the comics and all that now get their definitive voice. It really does elevate it. It makes all your previous instances of experiencing the characters a lot stronger. This is a book that definitely elevates certain characters who have been a little stagnant in some characterization, or at least in like how they seem like they've been embodying their role. Definitely a lot of positives, and I mean, again, that voice acting is just of the highest caliber.
Absolutely. The production value around everything that has to do with Penguin Random House Audio is always top tier. I love their audiobooks. Been a big fan for almost a decade now of their audiobooks, and the audio dramas are on another level. These are excellent. The voice acting is incredible. You have people like Mark Thompson, veterans of the audiobooks, returning here, and I've always loved his voice he does for Marchion Ro. So good as that character, and everybody's a real standout. But I always love Marchion. He's one of my favorite parts of the High Republic Initiative, and Mark Thompson's performance as Marchion is still top tier. Like if they ever did an animated or live action Marchion, I would love them to pull some reference from the way he does the voice. This story is relatively simple. It's a story that doesn't necessarily grip me as much as I had hoped. There are parts, it is roller coaster-esque in a way. There are parts that really grab my attention, I would say, especially in the second act. The first act I found to be a little tedious. And then the third act I enjoyed, but I wasn't necessarily fully happy with the way the whole story resolved. Having the choice to have Lourna Dee tell this story in kind of flashback interview form, it's a choice that I think breaks a little bit of the tension of the narrative. It forces Lourna Dee to be the lead, as she is. She's on the cover and everything, but she's one of the least interesting characters in the story. In my opinion, Lourna Dee has never been able to fully transcend that top level of High Republic characters, and you have so many top High Republic characters around her and so many important, exciting events around her that I felt the story kind of lose focus at times to go back to its main subject. Really strong strong audio drama from a performance and effects standpoint. Like you mentioned, the sounds coming from different directions, it really enhanced the vibe. You have people running out of scene and their voices would trail off as they leave. Great music choices. It is a very high value production. If you're interested in the audio drama format purely and not just in this story, you'll love this. This is really, really strong. I would say it is on that level of Battle of Jeddah in terms of effects and sounds and voice cast. It has all that. They've just have this character that they're kind of married to in the audio drama format, and that does make the story a little less expansive than Battle of Jeddah was when it really could tell the full breadth of that story. But let's get into the characters because, of course, like I mentioned, Lourna Dee is the main character. She's the one on the cover, and she is the character that Cavan Scott has written now twice for the High Republic audio drama format. She dominates this story, and it is a continuation, a recap, a kind of fulfilling of her arc throughout the entirety of the High Republic, both in books, comics, audio drama, and now here solidifying her as that character that she's been destined to become throughout these stories. And then on top of that, you do have a massive cast of big, exciting characters from the High Republic, not just the comics like Keeve and the return of Tey and all these different characters who have been a part of the Phase 3 comics. You do have also some inclusions from some other big characters who do make appearances that I found exciting, not to mention just Marchion Ro and a lot of the Nihil characters. Boolan is a big character here. Sonic, when you listen to this book, what were your thoughts overall on the characters and who stood out to you as some of the best ones in this story?
It's interesting because I think a lot of the characters, the way they function is sometimes based off their performance or based off of another medium. There's very few characters that I would say that dramatically like own this one title, this one audio drama. But if there was one, it is Marchion Ro. I think anyone reading Phase 3, you can enjoy everything that's going on with the occlusion zone. You can enjoy the mystery surrounding the blight, especially in books like Tears of the Nameless and all the questions that are coming out of it, the possible solutions. But the one thing that's been there in both the adult novels that we've read so far is almost this little bit of passivity with Mark Inro, which I think is totally in line with the character. He's made this huge big play, massively successful, and then he doesn't know what to do with himself. But I think the one thing that was a little like mildly like upsetting for me in Temptation of the Force at least is that he's still not like necessarily going back to that phase one like vitality. This is the audio drama that you need to read to like remember that that's still in him, right? Sometimes he just needs it to become personal. And there's a whole like scene in Ball with Lourna Dee that it's fantastic, right? It's like it's the one thing that I think is the summation of his character and also finally lets Lorna have that moment to shine throughout that audio drama. It was nice to see that like some of those insecurities were still there and if not a little bit more magnified when the right person is kind of pulling the lever. So this is definitely like the definitive Markian Ro experience for phase 3 for sure. Speaking of like a performance that really elevated a character, it's Tey Serrik. I mean, he's definitely a big player in the phase 2 comics and yeah, I mean, he's fun. He's an interesting character, you know, being a former guardian and all that. But it's in this story, now that he's older, grizzled, that I finally got to see like what they were trying to go for in the Phase 3 comics when he appears. This is absolutely indebted to that. Like there is a little mini recap for basically every character and what they were doing. But that voice, that like silly smirk, that playfulness, all that, I think that character didn't necessarily translate all the time to the comic medium, and I feel like he really does here. I guess the only other one I'd want to like really touch on is maybe Boolan. I think Boolan had like a pretty interesting backstory, knowing that he is one of the early younglings of the sorts of the Path of the Open Hand. Some of that was pretty cool, and how he had that connections with Sskeer. If you are listening to this and you're excited for Avar and Keeve, you do get moments with them, but definitely Keeve is still being saved for the Fear of the Jedi, this follow-up Marvel comics. Avar takes a minute to get going. She almost like loses a lot of that characterization that's there in phase 3. She's very much like her phase 1 comics characterization for a little bit there. I think by the end I at least could understand like sometimes it is the type of people that you're around, who you're with, that brings out different qualities in you. So you'll see a decent follow-up here for Avar.
Pretty much with you on most of the standouts. I mean, obviously, Lourna Dee is the main character. She does have some really good moments throughout this story, and ultimately, I did like this story more for her than I did Tempest Runner. I'm just not the world's biggest Lourna Dee fan. I don't think she's that interesting. She's not to me on the top tier of High Republic characters and not on the top tier of High Republic villains. When this story takes a focus on her, I often found myself wanting more of the other characters. And that's, I think, the problem inherent with this particular story is it does give you a lot of the other characters, but it's all sprinkles. It's a lot of setting up stuff. It's a lot of minor epilogues and conclusions to previous material and setting up the next stuff. It's a very much so a bridge story, but it is important for a couple of characters. Certainly, Sskeer has a big role in this story, and there are some massive things that happen to Sskeer. So if you are interested in this character of Sskeer, you kind of have to listen to this. And I thought Mark Thompson's performance as Sskeer was also great. Certainly just the way I imagine hearing Sskeer in my head when I'm reading the comics. So Boolan also had a strong story. I wasn't necessarily a massive fan of the way it ends, but overall, I thought Boolan was one of the more intriguing parts of this narrative. Keeve has her moments. She has moments that certainly lead you to believe she is the Keeve Trennis of the fallen Jedi, but then there are other times where she seems like a little bit of a different character. She's certainly conflicted, and I found that pretty strong in her performance here, so I thought Keeve was pretty solid. Avar felt like a completely different character from Temptation of the Force. She settles down a little bit as the story finds its groove, but towards the middle of the second act, beginning of the third act, I was wondering if this book was, or if this audio drama was supposed to come out prior to Temptation of the Force, because she is so different. But Marchion does steal pretty much every scene he's in. Mark Thompson's so good as the character, and I really enjoyed seeing that character come to life once again. He is brutal and more vicious than we've seen him throughout Phase 3. And if you want some of those iconic, exciting Phase 1-esque Marchion moments, there are quite a few of them throughout the story. And he plays well as a kind of opposite side of the coin of Lourna Dee. He's very much so on a similar path as her, and they have many times where they have to have conflicts of ideology as well as conflicts in terms of battle. So there are exciting moments between the two of them, and I did appreciate quite a bit of what Cavan Scott decided to do when he positions both of those characters against each other. So overall, we're going to wrap up our thoughts here, give you a score out of 5. Sanak, what would you rate Tempest Breaker out of 5?
This is a tough one to rank because even as we're talking about it, like sometimes I'm like noting a little bit more positives and that I'm remembering, some of that stuff didn't stick with me either. I think it's because it's just very strangely structured as this bridge piece, half filler, but still trying to be important. But overall, I still think it was good. I do like where it leaves Lourna Dee, especially. I do like where it leaves basically every character. It's gotten me re-hyped again for the comics because I did definitely enjoy the first run of the Phase 3 Marvel. Yeah, I think right now I would give this 3.25 out of 5.
I have a lot of similar thoughts as you on this story. This is a story that I found relatively average. It's a good story, not a great story. I think it's better than Tempest Runner, but nowhere near something like the Battle of Jeddah. If you're looking for big impact on the High Republic narrative, probably won't find it here. If you're looking for some impact on characters and some resolution on a lot of different plot lines for different characters, you will find a lot of exciting things here. And so kind of the way I'm looking at it is that if the production value is like a 4.5 out of 5, and the story to me is like a 3, then the overall experience, I'm going to give it a 3.5 out of 5. I think this is a solid story with a great audio drama around it. So thank you so much for watching our review. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe for more High Republic content. Thank you so much for watching this video, and we will see you all next time.